These are campaigns, much like the campaigns for our own other statewide offices and for our own offices. And even so, you may only have 70 or 80% in Minnesota anyway of the voters voting, making the decisions. And then if something passes, it's there. It's there for a long, long time. That's why we have a Constitution. But there's a reason why we have a representative democracy, too. We were not created as a direct democracy. We were created intentionally as a representative democracy. We are elected in the Senate and in the House, and every local government, city councils, county boards, school boards, same principle, same theory, goes back to our basic civics classes in high school. We have a right to vote as citizens, to make our judgments, to look at the candidates and decide who best represents our views, and who, when we can't be there sitting through the hours and hours of testimony and doing the research, whose judgment are we going to trust to make those decisions for us? And if in the end, when we stand for re-election, we don't measure up to our constituents' measuring stick, they can vote us out. They can vote us out. That's democracy. But that's also the ability to say, you know, antiquarian Latz, who's been there for 50 years, no longer shares our views. We want someone there who does and who's going to be more current with our social mores and our conscience. And that's the way it works. I can guarantee you I will never be here 50 years. And probably not for that reason. But that's representative democracy, and Alexis de Tocqueville was absolutely right, as Rabbi Stock-Spilker said. We ought to be afraid of the tyranny of the majority. Now, that's not to say that the majority shouldn't rule. The majority does rule, but as Senator Marty indicated, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in particular, in both the Minnesota and the United States Constitutions, are there specifically to protect the rights of the minorities, to protect the rights of those who don't have the majority views, but who have rights and have beliefs that we believe as a people are so fundamental that even if we disagree vehemently with what they think and what they want to do and what they have to say, if it doesn't have a physical threat to me, then they can do it and they can say it. I can walk out in the street and say just about anything I want. I can't walk into a movie theater and yell fire unless there's really a fire. And that's where we draw some of those lines, because that threatens the physical safety. Well, I'll tell you this, my marriage is not going to be threatened by someone else's gay marriage. It might be threatened by having to work here tonight until midnight, depending on how the agenda after this goes. There goes my date night, I guess. But I don't feel threatened one bit, as Senator Marty was indicating. I don't feel threatened one bit if a same-gender couple want to get married. Doesn't bother me a bit. All the power to them. In fact, there are a lot of relationships like that that last a whole lot longer and are much more filled with love and nurturing and caring and support for each other than opposite gender marriages. What I found troubling was a suggestion that the decisions that we make here are not quite as important as a decision on whether gay marriage ought to be allowed in Minnesota, or whether we ought to enshrine the notion of marriage as one man, one woman, so it should go to the ballot. For a lot of people in Minnesota, I think the decisions that we make around here, like cutting off health insurance for kids, is a lot more important than whether or not two men can get married. If someone's 3-year-old doesn't get care with a doctor when they need that care, if I were a parent, I'd be a lot more worried about that than whether or not 2 men or 2 women could get married. I think the decisions we make around here about not providing enough financial support to the early childhood education system and screening system is a lot more important for those 2- and 3-year-olds that may need that early screening or that extra help that we're all as taxpayers going to pay for when they can't catch up and they aren't able to be successful and they end up on the public dole. For for the lives of those 2- and 3-year-olds, or 4- and 5-year-olds, I think a lot of people would say that's a lot more important. We make those decisions around here every spring. When we decide we're not going to provide enough funding for our K-12 system, we end up with classroom sizes of 32 or 35, so no student can get the individual attention that they need. I would say that's a lot more important a decision around here for a lot of people whose kids are in the schools. Mr. Chairman, Senator Limmer, I was also troubled by the notion that those who are in opposite gender marriages are the victims in all of this. They are the vast majority in our society. They have all of their rights already enshrined in statute and in case law and in culture in a lot of places. And they didn't have to worry about whether or when they should come out. They didn't have to worry about being bullied because of their sexual orientation in school, or beat up, or worse, killed. It's really troubling to me that they're now trying to characterize themselves as victims. To me, that argument's a complete non-starter. When we get to the question of a public, or of a referendum or a constitutional amendment, you know, it's not only the public's opportunity to be involved. That's not their only chance to be involved in a public policy discussion. We get thousands of emails. I get thousands of emails every session around here. Every senator does. And mail and phone calls. And we all have listening sessions in our districts. And we all stand for election every 2 or 4 years. What I want to suggest is that this move to make this a constitutional amendment, it's a political tactic. That's all it is. It's a political tactic. It's because there isn't a level of confidence in the statute. It's because constitutions are hard to change once they are amended. So if it's successful, it's there for many, many, many years. I think we need to look at the motive, not just the political tactic. The motive here is one and the same as the motive behind the state statute that now prohibits these marriages. And the motive is to enshrine the rights of marriages as it's currently defined between opposite gender persons. And the tactic to do that by a constitutional amendment is just that. I grew up as a minority. I'm still a minority, religiously, in my community. And occasionally, I'm reminded of that on the Senate floor. And I think it's a travesty. And I don't think anyone should have to do that. And if we are going to enshrine in our state constitution essentially religious views that will remind a segment of our population that they are a minority, and not only remind them, but specifically discriminate against them, seems to me that's just not appropriate. I'm not going to say it's unconstitutional, although it should be, because we have a process, and if it were to be passed, it would be constitutional. But to me, that's not American. It wasn't the precepts upon which our country was founded, which was religious freedom. Religious freedom. It was those persecuted who escaped from Europe to come to a country where they could freely observe their own religions. So let's allow religious freedom for everyone, not just for the majority. I think we ought to vote down this bill.